Hang out with Amelia Rose Earhart. My name is Farzana Schofield, and I work for Honeywell Aerospace. We're so happy to have Amelia with us today, live from Colorado. Amelia will have Honeywell avionics technology behind her as she sets out to fly out around the world next summer, closely following the original Amelia Earhart's 1937 flight plan. Honeywell is proud to be a founding partner in her journey. Today we're going to be asking her some questions of our own, but we're going to be taking your questions too. Please use Twitter and the hashtag AskAmelia with your question, and we'll answer as many as we can. Amelia, please introduce yourself and tell us about the Amelia Project.
Well, thank you so much. My name is Amelia Rose Earhart, and I am the pilot behind the Amelia Project. And really, the project started in my mind about 10 years ago with the crazy dream of flying around the world and symbolically completing the original 1937 flight that Amelia Mary Earhart started and unfortunately was never able to complete. And in the process, I realized that as a pilot myself, being a namesake of Amelia, I had a really unique opportunity here to where we could show the world.
Hang out with Amelia Rose Earhart. My name is Farzana Schofield, and I work for Honeywell Air.
And sorry about that. So when it comes to the flight, I decided that we had a great opportunity to show the world what an amazing adventure could look like in terms of a flight, showing off the latest and greatest technology, and also inspire young women to get involved in aviation, and really just inspire everybody to try out their own adventure and see what that looks like just in terms of incorporating that into their own life. So when it came to the flight, I had a lot of planning to be done, and so I teamed up with my co-pilot, Patrick Carter, who is a high-time pilot based in Fayetteville, Arkansas, and he's got a lot of turbine time, a lot of international flight time, and really has done just an incredible job helping me plan this mission. We take off in June, and we will leave from Oakland, California, and have 14 stops. And we'll get into all of those details here in just a little bit, but that's the overview of the project, and we're so thrilled to be teaming up with Honeywell with a connected cockpit and all the different aspects of the avionics that we'll be putting in the airplane. A namesake of Amelia.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Amelia. So you have a 501c3 organization called the Fly with Amelia Foundation. Could you tell us a little bit about its mission?
So the mission of the project, we're having a little bit of an audio issue here. I'm going to turn that off. So the mission of the foundation behind the project was to get young women inspired when it comes to aviation. We really wanted to get girls engaged in a realistic way where we weren't just saying, go out and learn to fly. We really wanted to lead by example, and that's why as the leader of the Fly with Amelia Foundation, which is a Colorado nonprofit, and we just got our 501c3 status, which we're thrilled about, we're able to put young women through flight school. And I focus on women who are between the ages of 16 and 18 because I think that's a really pivotal point in our lives as young women. We're making big decisions. We're deciding whether or not we're going to go to college, whether or not we're going to start a family, you know, what all that plays into. But when you're making those decisions and you're able to use aviation as a means of gaining confidence and really discovering who you are through flight, I think that's a really pivotal age. So that's why I'm focusing on there. The other main aspect of the foundation's mission is our STEM education program. And STEM education, of course, based around science and technology, mathematics, we're so thrilled to incorporate flight into the classroom with that. Wings Over the Rockies Air and Space Museum is the museum here in Denver where I'm on the board of directors, and we work together with schools and different organizations to get kids involved in flight. And we're able to take that curriculum, put it in the classroom, and that's something that we're developing right now with educators here locally, and eventually the goal is to have that curriculum and that platform available to all teachers all over the world. So if they'd like to put it in the classroom, start using technology in terms of bringing smartphones and tablets into the class and really using flight in that aspect, that's where we're really going to have a lot of success with that. But the basic model of the foundation is get young women flying, get them in airplanes, because if they're anything like me, if they have a good sense of adventure, they're really going to enjoy the process. And right now we've got a spectacular young woman, her name is Destiny, based here in Colorado, who is learning to fly up in Erie, Colorado, and she is just really enjoying the process, and she's got a wonderful heart for flight, and I know she's going to go very far. So it's fun to mentor her through the process, and I have no doubt that she'll take those skills that she's learning as a pilot and apply them to all parts of her life. So we're building slowly and steadily, and just so thrilled. And the way it ties back into the actual flight will be, I think that people set the best example by leading by example. So with my flight around the world, bringing a lot of attention to young women in aviation, that translates into the foundation. Hopefully we can raise a lot of funds for it.
Great. And I think that you've got the feed on there, Amelia. If you want to hit mute on there, that would be great, on the live feed that's going on. But let's chat about planes. Why did you select the Pilatus PC-12 for your journey?
So the reason that we chose the Pilatus PC-12 is beyond just being a stunning airplane that is beyond belief reliable and the latest and greatest technology. We wanted to choose something with an excellent range on it, something that could get us far enough to where we could link together these 14 different stops around the country. But what we realized is that if we wanted to do it in this fashion, staying true to crossing the same oceans that Amelia Earhart crossed and keeping the flight a real true adventure, we needed to add a little bit of fuel. So we decided to take the PC-12, which really, with the Pratt & Whitney engine, it's got the PT-6, which is incredibly reliable. We've got the cargo capacity to take all of our gear, all of our survival gear along, and it's just a very well-built airplane. The combination of the Pilatus with the Honeywell avionics just makes it so connected and incredibly just in touch with the latest technology. By putting on the additional 200 gallons of fuel, which is what we plan on doing, we'll be able to cross those oceans, narrow it down to those 14 stops, and 10 of those stops will match up with the original Amelia Earhart route, which I'm particularly excited about because we have such historic significance. We'll be able to take a look at the way the airports in these locations have changed over the years, the way that we will be able to fly in and think, what are the differences between the Lockheed Electra versus the Pilatus PC-12? It was a natural choice. Pilatus is an incredible leader in the aviation industry, always staying on the cutting edge of everything that's happening, and in terms of changes with avionics, changes with the airframe, and making the most valuable use of what we are faced with today in the aviation world. I just think that it's a natural decision to go with the PC-12, and we couldn't be happier. Pilatus is another one of our founding partners, and them being based in Switzerland and also Broomfield, Colorado has been a great help. I'm based in Denver, Colorado, and that allows me to go up to the factory and watch as they install all the avionics and continue to build the aircraft as it comes along. And I love that local connection here. With the foundation being based in Denver too, we'll be able to take young women out to the factory and show them what it's all about when it comes to putting an airplane together, piecing all the components together, putting in the interiors. So I just think it's a great connection in that way, and yeah, we just feel totally safe. And on top of everything else, it's a beautiful plane that's a whole lot of fun to fly.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit more about Honeywell satellite communications. How will the satellite communications technology help you on your flight?
So when we came to our decision to work with Pilatus and use the PC-12 on this flight around the world, one of our huge decision points was that the fact that the Honeywell avionics in the cockpit are just above and beyond anything that we could ever dream for. And we've got resources on our website, flywithamelia.com, that'll give you an interactive tour of the cockpit. And when it comes down to deciding what you need in the cockpit, the more connectivity, the better. Now, of course, Honeywell provides what they call the connected cockpit. We've got ways to link up through satellite communication to locations all over the world. What our plan is to do is to use the Inmarsat network and our SATCOM system to essentially live stream the entire flight around the world. And what we'd like to do is anytime we're in the air, we'll have our cameras going. Camera behind us in the cockpit, cameras pointing out to the wingtip so you can see the view relative to the Earth. We've flying at about 27,000 feet. So if you think about the social component of this flight, having a connected cockpit with the Honeywell technology and all the Honeywell avionics, this makes this the first flight of its kind anywhere in the world. Anytime that someone has tried to do this, they've had limited connectivity, but when we add together everything with our SATCOM connection and Honeywell, we'll be able to have a 100% live streamed cockpit. We'll be Facebooking, we'll be tweeting, and that's part of the reason it's going to have so much of a benefit having two people in the cockpit. One of us flying, of course, communicating with air traffic control, flight planning. The other one can be socially interacting and talking to folks back home and all over the world about what the flight has been like so far. And boy, when you think about the access that that will give to people on the ground, young women may be interested in flight, I'm really hoping that it takes away a little bit of the fear that some people may have about aviation or flying into different parts of the world that they may not understand that well, or they may be fearful about flying into. Plus, I just think it'll be a whole lot of fun. I always like to compare it to Felix Baumgartner's Jump from the Edge of Space, when we were all watching on our smartphones, watching as to see what would happen when he leapt from his capsule. And that was live streamed, and that was the first time, and I know that the whole world was captivated with that. So I'd really like to create that same type of engaging situation where, especially towards the end of the flight, when we're really completing the section of flight that Amelia didn't get to complete herself, we'll be flying over Howland Island into Hawaii. We'll be flying the PC-12 from Hawaii all the way back to Oakland. And with Honeywell's avionics, we'll be able to show you firsthand what type of communication, what type of planning, what type of weather radar we're going to have on these parts of our flight. So it really is an unprecedented way to join in and really be in the cockpit with us. But beyond just the connectivity part with the SATCOM technology, we're also thrilled to have synthetic vision, for instance, to where even in a low visibility situation, we can see what the ground looks like. We can see what the airport configuration is like, any sort of terrain on the ground. It increases our safety to a level that is so beyond belief exciting that I couldn't be more thrilled with our choice. And of course, we'll have the latest and greatest technology in our plane, and from that point, we can't wait to share all the details and any questions that you have along the way too about how any of that technology works. We'll be discussing that on the blog and also through our social channels.
That is awesome, Amelia. Thank you so much for sharing that. Let's chat a little bit about the flight itself. So we have our first question from Twitter. Ali actually asked, what are you most nervous about for your 100-hour flight?
So the question was, what am I most nervous about? There are a lot of things to be nervous on when you think about a flight around the world, because there's so much planning that goes into it. Not only do you have to fly an airplane, you also have to plan around weather, which helps. I'm studying to be a meteorologist right now, so I am absolutely a weather geek. I'm nervous about the weather, but the reason that we chose this time of year, June of 2014, climatologically, it's the best time that we can go. We hope for great weather, clear weather. We're on the edge of hurricane season on the early side of it, so we won't have to deal with, hopefully, that. We're hoping for some nice push winds, some tailwinds as we head around the world. But yeah, my nerves have to do with weather. My nerves have to do with the communication. I mean, when you're flying, and I'm in my flight planning room right now. I've got this map around the world here behind me. When you look at these different parts of the world, it's easy to think flying in the U.S., okay, it's manageable. I know that when we get there, we're all going to speak the same language. We're all going to be on the same page, right? Well, when you fly into different countries, there are different ways that you do things. You know, we communicate differently. There are different standards for how things are done. So I'm a little bit nervous around that. The flight portion, the flying over the ocean, doesn't really scare me. I know that we have such a reliable engine, such a reliable airplane, and we also have great survival gear on board. Patrick and I went to survival training, in fact, in Groton, Connecticut. We went to Survival Systems, Inc., and they tossed us out in the ocean, showed us how to use the life raft. So if anything were to go wrong, we know how to communicate, we know how to take care of ourselves in a way that would allow us to be rescued. But we're not going to have to worry about that. So nerves, mostly planning, mostly hoping that that everybody is staying really engaged with the process as we go. And that's why we're making the trip happen so fast. We want to do 14 stops so that people stay really engaged with the process. And each and every day we can check in and show people what it's like to fly. They'll be essentially there in the cockpit with us and be able to peek in and stay tuned in the whole time. So my nerves, I think, is something new every day. And but luckily, anything you're nervous about just means that you care about it. So that's one of my little sayings. So if I'm nervous about something, what I'll usually do is just research it as much as I can to get to the root of where those nerves are coming from, and then from that point, fix the problem and move on. I'm a little bit nervous around that.
Great. So Martin from Facebook had another question for you, and he actually asked what direction you'll be flying in. Will it be east to west or west to east?
So the question was, which direction are we going to fly on the flight around the world? And we plan on going eastbound. We're going to have nice tailwinds that way. A westbound flight is a lot more rare to see because you're flying against the wind in a lot of different situations. So we decided to fly eastbound, leaving Oakland, California, making our way through the U.S., essentially down to Miami. Oakland, of course, is where Amelia started her flight back in 1937, and then Miami, Florida was the last spot that she was seen in the United States. Of course, she then went on to continue her flight. She had a lot more stops than we'll have. She had over 30 stops on her flight plan, and we'll have 14, and 10 of ours, like I said, match up with Amelia's stops. But once we start going eastbound, we'll climb up to about 27,000 feet in the PC-12, and we'll be able to be connected that whole time, even that high up. And with the SATCOM networks, you'll be able to jump in and see our altitude, our heading, basic information about the flight, and we'll basically have a flight tracker on Honeywell's website that will allow us to, every couple minutes, ping our location. So if you imagine that little red dot, just flight tracking right along the way, that's how you can keep track of where we are over the course of that 14 days and 14 stops. Eastbound. We're going to have
Okay, great. That's great. And if anybody has any questions, if you just joined us, you can use hashtag #AskAmelia on Twitter, and we'll be getting those questions and answering as many as we can live. We did get another question from Dan on Twitter. He asked, we talked a little bit about the route, and you had talked about the 10 stops. But how about what's going on in the world today with all the geopolitical stuff that's going on? Are you going to have to change the route up a little bit, or is it going to pretty much stay the same?
That's such a great question. So the question being, how do geopolitical situations factor in with our flight planning? And absolutely, it is a big issue. Flying through Africa, we have to be very aware of just what the relationship with the United States is like. And we're very lucky in that English is the international language for aviation. So we're lucky in that we'll be speaking English the entire time we're flying. However, once you get on the ground, you've got to go to a situation or an airport where, people are welcoming. And the fact is, we've got to get overflight permits. We've got to route around certain countries. And the other thing is, we've been planning this flight for over a year now in a really serious way. But even before that, we're kind of looking historically which countries have issues with the United States where we wouldn't necessarily want to fly. Things could change between now and June. So that's something we've really got to keep ourselves abreast of all the political implications of flying through certain airspace, and that could change. Luckily, we're working with a really dynamic flight planning team with Jeppesen, and they're able to monitor those things, watch those relationships, help us with the permits, help us with the visas, landing, what happens on the ground, whether or not we need increased security in certain locations. So yes, it is a big factor, and it forces me to stay on my toes in terms of international relations, especially as we go into next summer, and we'll be watching that very closely. And it should be interesting to compare the historic changes as well. What were the geopolitical situations when Amelia flew through? Was she welcomed? Was it totally shocking that she would fly into these certain airports, and would she be able to fly into them in 2014? So it's one of the most interesting parts of the flight, in my opinion, and we'll keep tracking, and we'll let you know about those decisions as they're made and as we isolate really which specific airports we'll be flying into, and those are some of the details that we're working with our handlers and our flight planners on right now. Countries have issues.
That's really interesting. So in terms of bringing it back to the United States, I guess this question, this is actually from Mark from Facebook. He wants to know how you're going to travel between Los Angeles and Miami nonstop in a PC-12.
So that's a great question. The question was, how will we fly from Oakland, California to Miami nonstop? And the other big questions are, how would we make our way from Hawaii back to Oakland nonstop? Those are really long legs, and that's why we're putting additional fuel on the PC-12. And if you think about the interior of a cockpit of the airplane, and like I said, flywithamelia.org has a full interior interactive video that you can go and check the aircraft out at. But you'll see that there are a lot of seats, there are a lot of, there's basically beautiful interior, there's carpet on the floor, there's woodwork. All of that is going to be left out of our specific PC-12 until it goes into normal rotation as a demo plane. But essentially, it'll be inside just insulation and the framing of the aircraft. So we will be able to put an additional fuel tank in the back that'll house about 200 extra gallons of fuel. And our goal is to get our fuel requirement or our fuel distance abilities up to about 2,500 nautical miles. And if you think about that, that opens up the whole world in terms of those longer legs. We're able to cross oceans. We're able to make our way back from Hawaii all the way back to Oakland, and certainly from Oakland to Miami. But what we've decided to do in the meantime is add a stop in Denver, because that's where I'm from. We plan a big celebration as we head on through to kind of kick off the flight, and also show support from all the Denver agencies here that have really been so supportive. I even got a note from our governor last year before my flight across the U.S. saying, State of Colorado supports you. So I'm happy to stop and really get kids engaged in the process as we go. So we have added a stop, but technically we could make it all the way from Oakland to Miami. There are a lot of seats. There are a lot of...
So another question we got from Facebook, and it kind of has to do with the flight planning again, but are you being troubled by some of the same flight restrictions Amelia had to deal with, the original Amelia, I should say, had to deal with planning her flight? And that question came from Gregory on Facebook.
So the question about flight restrictions is an interesting one, because when you're looking at the changing geopolitical situations, like we said from a couple questions back, things can change day to day. So when you look at the flight restrictions of, say, if we were going to leave on the flight tomorrow, we would have a certain flight plan. It may be a totally different flight plan by the time we take off in June. But when you compare it to the restrictions that Amelia Earhart had, she went into countries all across the globe, and everybody was pretty welcoming to her. And I have no doubt that we'll get a lot of the same treatment that the first Amelia Mary Earhart got. People were really engaged. I mean, she was the biggest celebrity of her time. If you could compare her to somebody today, I think she would be like a Felix Baumgartner in the aviation world. But celebrity-wise, she was, boy, just incredibly loved and adored. I hate to compare her to just a typical celebrity of our day, but any movie star, any musician, Amelia Earhart was of that caliber. And all over the world, she was known for what she was doing. So when she came in a lot of areas, big celebrations were thrown. Everybody was welcoming her. And I'm sure there were situations along the way that maybe weren't noted in the history books that we've learned about Amelia in. But in terms of overall reception of her project, everything was taken pretty well. Today, I don't necessarily expect to get big shindig parties thrown everywhere we land, but I don't think we're going to have too many restrictions outside of Africa. And just to generally go over our route, what we plan on doing is, I naturally look at my map when I start talking about it. We plan on leaving Oakland, heading through Denver, Miami. We'll drop down to the eastern coast of Brazil. We'll cut across from Brazil to the western coast of Africa, heading over to the area near Djibouti, Mumbai. Then we'll head down into areas near Papua New Guinea and Lae, dropping down to Darwin, which is the northern coast of Australia. From that point, we'll head to areas near Christmas Island. Now, Christmas Island is where it really gets interesting, because that's an area very close to Howland Island, which is most likely the area where Amelia disappeared. That's where her last radio transmissions were heard. So when we leave Christmas Island and head up through Howland, we want to make a low pass. And we won't be able to land because there's no runway there, but it is a U.S. territory. So we'll make a low pass over Howland Island, then continue on to Hawaii, and then Hawaii back to the U.S., heading in towards Oakland to complete the flight. And really, I expect through the South Pacific, I think that'll be some of the most engaging parts of the trip, and I'm sure that part of the world, they honor Amelia as is. So we've already received emails, we've already received folks who have said, please, stop by and say hello, pay a visit while you're here, going around on your flight. So I am excited about the people that we're going to meet along the way, and also the challenges that pop up. I think that the challenges are all part of having a big adventure like this, and if it was easy and everybody was receiving it perfectly, then it wouldn't be quite as much of an adventure. New Guinea, Lae.
Great, perfect. So another question that we received is how you're going to take care of yourself during the flight. So what are you bringing to eat, and how do restroom breaks and showers and all of that stuff? How does that work?
Right. So that's such a good question. How do we take care of ourselves on the flight? And that's an interesting question, because if you think about it, we're going to be flying 8 to 9 hour legs on some days. Those will be our longest legs, and that's a long time to be sitting in an airplane. So there will not be a restroom on the plane. We've decided to leave it off for weight restrictions, but not to be crude. There are smaller kind of portable restrooms that you can take along with you. So, Patrick and I will be in really tight quarters. One person flies the plane, and it is a single pilot airplane, so if one person needs to take over for a minute, that can happen. But beyond that, what are we going to eat? What are we going to drink? How are we going to sleep? Luckily, every single day we will be stopping to get our recommended amount of sleep requirements throughout our flight. So essentially, we'll take off early in the morning, eat something very light on the ground. In flight, I'll probably be so nervous that I won't be able to eat much at all. But I know that we will need to keep our energy up, keep very hydrated, and keeping all of those things in mind, we'll be stopping at our next destination, probably doing some media work, talking about the flight, engaging socially, making sure the aircraft has all of its checks done. There's going to be a lot to go through in a very methodical way that Patrick and I are planning out well in advance of the flight. And then once we land, we'll sleep, get our 8 hours hopefully, and then the next day it all starts again. So we will be resting, we will be showering at night, staying in different hotels throughout the world as we fly on through, staying really close to the airport. If it was up to me, I'd probably sleep on the plane, make it just a big camping trip, but I know that's not realistic. So yeah, and those details are kind of getting all hashed out, deciding exactly what to eat, what kind of nutritional requirements do you need to allow your brain to be that focused and engaged for 8 to 9 hours, then land, keep up your energy in order to get all the checks done with the airplane, pre-flighting it for the next day's flight, going over everything in the morning. So I'm still working on that. I'm sure it's going to be a high-protein, lean diet, keeping it pretty simple for those 2 weeks. And I'll probably go into some sort of training beforehand in terms of how much water to drink to keep myself hydrated without, when you're stressed and you don't drink enough water, you tend to get a lot of headaches. We don't want those things to happen. So I'm working with that, and talking to a couple of nutritionalists along the way too, because we do want to stay within. We don't want to throw our bodies too far off during the flight, but we also do want to be very aware that we've got weight restrictions on the plane. So it's not like we'll be packing huge, heavy amounts of food. And in terms of water, we'll be bringing enough for our flight, and then filtering it along the way if we need to as we get to parts of the world where we can't necessarily just go buy a bottle of water. So yeah, all those things are being taken into consideration, and we'll certainly have more information about that as we get closer to the flight as well. Details are kind of getting all
awesome. So let's talk a little bit about destinations and where you're landing and everything like that. Which destination are you most excited to see?
So I'm excited about all of the destinations, but when it comes down to really looking forward to certain parts of the world versus others, I have to say the South Pacific is something that is truly going to be thrilling for me. I mean, we're going to be flying over a lot of water. When we get down to Darwin and then make our way to Christmas Island and are able to do that low pass over Howland, I think that's the part of the flight that, like I said, I know I'll get chills the whole way through, but I think that one's going to have some really special meaning for me. Amelia Earhart has been somebody who I've obviously looked up to my entire life, and this flight I think will bring a new level of connection with me to her as her namesake. And while I know we're not doing the flight in the same plane that she was or flying the exact same route, it's really about the symbolic completion of the flight and continuing her adventure that she never got to finish back in 1937. So now we've got the technology, we've got the safety, we've got the communication to show people for the very first time what it was like to fly around the world, now in a modern context. So I think what I'm most looking forward to is that low pass over Howland Island, and then everything beyond that. That's the area that Amelia never got to see with her own 2 eyes. She did make flights in that part of the world, but it wasn't a part of the original around the world flight. So I'm pretty sure that between our low pass at Howland, continuing up to Hawaii, and then from Hawaii back into the U.S., heading back into Oakland, I'm sure I'll be pretty thrilled to see that U.S. soil as we come back in and land at Oakland to complete the flight, and not so much for a safety standpoint, but I'm thinking just for what I'll be feeling in my heart and the chills that I'll have about working so hard on this project and doing it in honor of Amelia. And hopefully we'll have a lot of young girls watching the flight as they go to, getting excited about watching us touch down. So yeah, I know that's a long-winded answer, and I get a little emotional about it when I really think about what's it going to be like when I sit and visualize the flight flying over that ocean and seeing that endless, just vast blue sea in front of us. The first time we see the land at Howland and then flying back into Oakland will be pretty magical. To show people
that's great, and I can totally I'm so excited to look at all your Instagram photos and catch up with you as you continue to go to all these different destinations. So excuse me, we were talking a little bit about Amelia's last known position, and are you going to do anything special? I mean, are you going to do anything special online or anything like that around her last known position? And that question comes to us from Pedro on Twitter.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for asking that question. We have all sorts of special things planned for the area near Howland. Most of them will be socially engaged activities, we'll call them. A low pass is one of the things that we have planned, getting down as low as we can to see that view of Howland. What was Amelia Earhart looking for? What was she going to see with her two eyes? So we, having cameras on board the airplane, they'll be pointed out the window, so you'll be able to see Howland Island on our social channels, on our live stream with Honeywell's SATCOM technology. So as you're watching from home, you'll know exactly when we're getting close there. You know, bank the airplane, you'll be able to look down out the window and see exactly what we're seeing. So I think that's pretty special. We've got some fun announcements with the foundation that we plan on blasting out to the world as we fly over Howland Island, and those will have to do with flying opportunities based around the foundation and getting a lot more young women engaged in flight, and I couldn't be happier about that. But beyond that, we have a couple different locations around our flight. For instance, when we land in Leh, there are a couple of different organizations there that honor Amelia with monuments and statues, and someone actually invited us to come in and plant a tree in honor of Amelia. So there are all sorts of fun ideas. Most of them will be social just because there's no runway on Howland Island for us to land in. But giving that view and also making our announcements on Facebook and Twitter and on the live stream will be a big part of that. So that one you're going to have to stay tuned for. But luckily, with our little red traveling dot across the globe, you'll be able to know exactly when we're getting close, and you'll know the exact moment when we're making that low pass over.
Gotta love technology, right? That's awesome, and that's amazing. So we have another question from Jen and in Denver, and she asked, how did you decide on where to stop during this long flight?
So where did we decide, or how did we decide where to stop? We decided to stop as close to Amelia's original route as possible. So essentially what happened is I laid it all out. I put out a big map of the world, not quite this big, laid it out, drew out Amelia's route. And we said, okay, geopolitically, which destinations are safe? Range-wise, how far can we go between stops that will get us close to these destinations? Also, which spots around the world are going to be basically safe for us to fly into weather-wise when we're thinking about flying in June. So because it is an equatorial flight, we're going to naturally drop down out of Oakland, make our way down to the equator, pretty close in Brazil, and then from that point we stay very close to it all the way across Africa, India, and then we cross the equator when we drop down to Darwin. So we're able to match up 10 of those locations that were on Amelia's flight, and I'll have those listed. It's kind of a laundry list, so I'll post those online after we finish up our live chat here today. But we're really thrilled. I mean, 10 out of 14 is not too bad of a matchup there. Some of the most key stops in our routes, of course, will be Oakland, because that's where Amelia kicked off her flight. Miami is another very important one because that was the last spot in the United States that Amelia was seen before she disappeared on her flight around the world. From that point, Leh is a very important stop for us because that's the last place, period, that Amelia was seen before she disappeared. Howland, obviously, a key area for our low pass, and then heading into Hawaii, that one will also be very important because if you think about it, that was the next location that was expecting Amelia to show up there and celebrate her return to the United States. And then from that point, heading back into Oakland, that will be just a big celebration. I'll be so excited to get out and high five Patrick and stretch our legs for a little bit after getting done with 14 days of flight. Very close to it, all the way across.
Awesome. So from, I think this is, and pardon me if I'm spelling this right. Oh, it actually is John. He asked, what is the longest nonstop flight segment and where is it?
So our longest nonstop flight segments will be, we decided to add our stop in Denver, so that'll break up the trip from Oakland all the way to Miami. And previously that would be a really long flight. That would be all the way across the U.S. But our longest leg will be from Hawaii flying back to the U.S. And I've got my distances up here. I want to pull that up. And that will give us, I can give you the exact numbers on that. And I will also post a link to this as well, because it's kind of fun to take a look at those legs. Pull that up here. But essentially, when we're in flight for that long, having that additional fuel will allow us to make those sections of the flight and also have our fuel reserves that are necessary, deemed by the FAA, certain fuel requirements that you have to have upon landing. So we'll be doing it all safely. Nothing will be pushing it too far with these legs. And I've almost got the map up here. Circle mapper. All right, here it is, and I'll post a link to this. It's a really fun site called Great Circle Mapper. It shows you distances, time in flight, your different segmented paths. So it looks like the flight from Hawaii back to Oakland is about 2,093 miles, and that's about 8 hours and 3 minutes. Some of our longer legs heading in as we make our way will be from Nigeria, and then as we continue on through over towards Djibouti. That's another very long leg, and we'll see exactly how long that one is. Let's see, 2381 nautical miles, and that's a 9-hour flight. So yeah, pretty long, but keeping it at 9 hours I think is going to be our max. We could stay up longer physically, but we do want to stay comfortable, and we also want to keep within the range of about 2,500 nautical miles, which is what we'll boost it up to with our 200 extra gallons of fuel. Requirements that you have to have.
Fantastic. So another question that we have is from Katie, and I know that you talked on a few destinations, and we talked about Amelia's last known position, but aside from that, what are you looking most forward to with your flight around the world?
So I am a total inspiration junkie, and when I think about my version of adventure and where my whole concept of this flight around the world came from, it was because I was so inspired by the original Amelia Earhart. Being named after her is one thing, and it sparked a lot of conversations, and I was asked a lot of questions as a child about what that meant to be. But what I'm finding now is running a foundation and organizing the Amelia Project, it allows me to talk to the world about how thrilling it is to really live out your passion, live out your dreams, and go for it with your whole heart. And a flight like this doesn't just fall together. You've got to bring in sponsors. You've got to bring in flight planning coordinations with all sorts of different groups. You've got to reconfigure an aircraft to work for you. You've got to get overflight permits and visas, and you've got to get shots because you're flying into different parts of the world. So the planning, and what I'm most looking forward to, is showing people that with the right amount of determination and the right amount of focus, you can accomplish absolutely any adventure that you set your heart out to do. It doesn't have to be a flight around the world. It doesn't have to be jumping from the edge of space like Felix. It doesn't even have to be climbing a mountain. It can literally be anything. You can be starting a project. You can be developing a new friendship. It could be cooking a new dish at home. But every single thing that you're able to do, you attack it with that same amount of enthusiasm and that same amount of passion. So what I'm looking forward to most, I think, is showing the world that, yeah, just a girl who woke up one day a couple years back and said, I really want to fly around the world, step by step by step. It was possible. I want to show people that process, and I also want to show people how much it's added to my life, and hopefully they can use it as an example. And specifically with the girls who get involved with the foundation, we want to get them in airplanes. I'm so looking forward to those notes, those emails, those tweets, those Facebook messages that inevitably we will get during the flight. Hearing from a little girl that says, you know what, I watched your flight and now I want to be a pilot, because that is going to make her life just that much more engaged. Flying has so many possibilities and so many potentials with aerospace careers and different types of education. Bringing it into the classroom is so useful. So I know I get a little bit overly excited about this part, but I think that's what I'm most looking forward to, is watching other people get inspired by watching the flight take place. And then outside of that, I'm most looking forward to completing the flight symbolically in honor of Amelia, closing Amelia's flight plan, landing in Oakland, and hopefully setting off on another adventure after that. And I'm not quite sure what that'll be, but it'll be fun to plan it. And like I said, as long as you attack it with that same level of enthusiasm and planning and step-by-step process, anything's possible.
One day, a couple years
Great. And this question actually comes from me. I'm actually curious about this.
was possible.
When did you decide that you wanted to first become a pilot, and number two, fly around the world, like and take on this journey? How long has it been since you've done that,
Get them.
or made that
So
decision?
the question was, how did I get into flying? How did I know I wanted to fly around the world? Being named Amelia Earhart, and I am a namesake of Amelia's, not related to her, but named in honor of her. My parents named me Amelia Earhart to inspire me with that same passion that she had, that drive, that integrity for adventure, changing the world. And that's something that she did back in the 1930s, and it was a whole lot more difficult back then. For me, I feel like I have every opportunity available to me with the right resources, with the right help. So when it comes down to why I started flying, I started about 10 years ago, and I was in college. I was getting asked every single day of my life, oh, your name's Amelia Earhart. Are you a pilot? And unfortunately, for a long time, I had to say no, because I wasn't. I didn't feel like it was something that I could afford. I didn't feel like it was something that I was really welcome to do. I didn't see a lot of other women at the airport, so it was really an intimidating place to go. But when I started really thinking, okay, step by step, how could I make this happen? I saved up to take my very first Discovery flight, which was up in Boulder, Colorado, and it was about $60, $75 at the time. And I jumped into that airplane, and there was something so magical about lifting off the ground for the very first time. And I was in this junky old airplane with this crotchety old flight instructor who really was a pilot through and through. He loved flight, but he, basically just showed me the ropes and said, this is what it's like to take off. This is what it's like to fly. And my head was literally and figuratively in the clouds at that point. I could not get enough of the sky. I was dreaming about it. I was working hard towards it. Every last penny that I was saving to go put myself through flight school very, very, very slowly came through the years. I had some help from my mom, of course, as she would support me, just encouraging me to get out to the airport, and she would chip in when she could on these flight lessons, which was such a huge help. But it all came down to getting the actual license. I mean, that's the big thing. You can take flight lessons all day long, but until you get the actual license, there's a different feeling that comes along with that. So I finally got my pilot's license in Los Angeles, flying at Whiteman Airport a couple years back, and that was a big deal for me because I was flying in really busy airspace. I was completely in love with the process of flying, but to actually get your license and get that ticket, it really makes you feel like anything is possible. So from that point, I went on to get my instrument rating here in Denver. That's something that I completed a few months back. Right now I'm working on my commercial rating. And when I started thinking, okay, I started out with 0 flight hours, and now I've got my instrument rating, and that was something I was really proud of. And I started really thinking, well, what's stopping me from flying all the way around the world? Amelia Earhart planned it back in the 1930s, and she was nearly successful. She made her way about 85% of the way around on her trip. What would it look like if I just allowed my mind to start thinking realistically about how that could be possible? And when I started looking and breaking it down step by step, what would I need? How much money would I need to raise? How could I get other people involved? And how could I help others learn to fly in the process? It all started to make a lot more sense. And it all started literally with a giant piece of white paper on my kitchen table in my tiny little apartment with a bunch of Sharpies. And I was just writing down every idea that I had. And as you start to see those connections and you start to watch them take form, you realize that the world while it is literally a big place, everything starts to get connected, and especially in the aviation world. People were willing to team up and help us. People were willing to help with the routing. Facebook and Twitter has been such a great way to interact and connect because people are coming out of the woodwork saying, how can I get involved and how can I participate in this? So really it's been just all from that one discovery flight. And I do have to give the credit to my parents, of course, because one of the biggest questions that I get pretty often is, you know, if your name wasn't Amelia Earhart, do you think you would still be a pilot? And while I can't really figure out the answer to that, there's no way for me to know. I do give my parents credit for my flying and my passion that's come into this whole aviation career that it's turning into. Because without the name, I can't say that I would have discovered this passion and joy, and I just certainly hope I can show it to a lot more people because, boy, it's a lot of fun up there, and the views are incredible.
They all started to make
I bet they are. So in terms of training, how much training do you have to go through in order to complete a flight around the world? And what's been your favorite so far? And what are you looking most forward to?
So training for a flight around the world obviously requires just a lot of understanding of the aircraft, understanding of the airspace, understanding of what you as a pilot are comfortable flying into, and also the capabilities of just your mental capacity to organize everything. So I'm a pretty organized person as it is, and I'm also obviously very passionate about flight. But when it came to the training, I knew that I needed to find a co-pilot for this flight. Doing it alone, it is possible, but when you think about all the coordination of the cameras and the safety and the security of flying into these certain spots, and also just having a companion to come along on these flights, I knew I needed to choose the right co-pilot, and that's where Patrick came in. So Patrick Carter, like I said, is based in Fayetteville, Arkansas. He runs a company that builds cameras in the aviation world, so he's passionate about flight, just like I am. And we decided to team up on this project together. And I'm sure there are moments where he thinks I'm crazy because of my big crazy ideas around this flight. But luckily, he's got a little bit of that crazy in him too. But we have been training for the flight for about the last year or so. We went to SimCom flight schools in Florida, in Orlando, Florida. Training for the PC-12 was a 6-day initial course where you're flying in a flight simulator, and also doing an avionics course, which is where we learned all about the Honeywell system, the synthetic vision, everything that we'll have on board within our cockpit, our ability to see charts and maps and aeronautical, basically radar for around the globe. So unprecedented information there for my brain to handle. I was so just in love with the system and that training. But beyond that, we're going to be doing several ferry flights from Switzerland back to Broomfield, Colorado. Switzerland is where the Pilatus PC-12 is made. So Patrick and I will fly over separately to Switzerland, hop on the airplane, fly it back with another one of their ferry pilots, and that's one of the ways that we'll gain an understanding of the aircraft. We'll get to do several North Atlantic crossings, see some really beautiful parts of the world. And I'm pretty excited about that because our airplane that we'll be taking around the globe is a brand new Pilatus, and it's going to come over to the U.S. Towards the end of January. And if everything goes as planned, I will be on that flight and be flying in the PC-12 back to the U.S. Another really exciting part of our training has been sea survival training, and I mentioned that earlier. We went to Survival Systems, Inc., which is a group that trains a lot of military operations, a lot of folks who fly helicopters out to oil rigs, so they're flying over oceans, and essentially they need to understand how to deploy a life raft, how to get out of the airplane safely. If for some reason you had to land or you crashed into the water, you're wearing a seatbelt, you're buckled in, how do you get out of the airplane, and how do you get to the surface safely? So we went through dunker training where there's a fuselage with the front and the back side cut off. It gets dunked with a crane into a 14-foot pool, spun upside down. The pilots who are training, you're closing your eyes, you're holding your breath, you're unlatching your seatbelt, you're pushing the window out, and at that point you're swimming back up to the surface. And for somebody who really doesn't like the water at all, that was pretty intense. But it was some of the most incredible training. I gained so much confidence in that part of preparing for the flight. We've got a lot of video from that experience, getting in and out of the life raft, and that's up on our social media pages too, and we can link to those on Facebook later. But lots of training. We're also going to go to Pratt & Whitney's PT6 school to learn all about the engine, learn about the mechanics behind it, how to service it as we fly around the world. And we're really excited that Pratt & Whitney has just come on as one of our major sponsors of the Amelia project as well.
That's great. So during these trainings, I'm sure there's a good mix of different people from different walks of life. But my next question for you is, what's it like to be a woman in the aviation industry?
So we went through Denver training
and just to be clear, can you ask the question one more time? What is it like to be a woman in this industry?
Yes. Woman in this industry.
When it comes to being a woman in the aviation industry, it's one of those jobs where being a woman, you are absolutely the minority, but it puts you at a huge advantage. There are so many aerospace jobs that are so engaging for women to get involved with. You know, women, our brains, we think creatively, we want design to be involved, and there are so many ways that we can add to the airplanes of the future, to the flight planning of the future, to just the industry as a whole. So being a woman, at first, you look at it and you think, okay, there aren't many of us out here at the airport. In fact, I still have situations where I show up to the airport and I'm walking out to the airplane and I'll get stopped by a gentleman who knows who, I don't even know who they are, I'll get stopped and they'll say, "Are you lost, little lady?" And it's really fun to point at the airplane and say, "Nope, I'm going to go fly that one right over there." And it's really exciting, you know, when you're by yourself and you just get to trot on out there and go fly. So there are right now about 6 to 7% of pilots are women, and that really needs to change. There is nothing about aviation that is meant solely for the male population. It is so beautiful. It is so empowering to get up there in an airplane, especially a beautiful plane like the Pilatus that is just so ergonomically designed. It's a stunning aircraft. It's comfortable. You get inside and it just fits well. Every woman that I've ever taken up flying looks at me and says, "Wow, I can't believe that I haven't done this before." You know, it's so much fun, and it's such a unique way to see the world. So as a woman, it's the best part of my life. It is absolutely my most favorite thing to do. I even moved I moved to a different apartment so I could be closer to the airport. That's how much I love flight. And when it comes to showing that to other women through the foundation, that's one of the most engaging parts. I want to get those numbers up. I want to get more women flying, but I also just want to show them the joy of what it's like to be up there in the air and really put yourself in a unique situation that not a lot of people get to be a part of. But with the right planning, with the right type of education, and with that passion for aerospace and aviation, it's absolutely possible.
That's great. That's wonderful, and I know that you're going to be taking huge strides here to do wonderful things for women in aviation. We're almost out of time, so I'm just going to have one more question for you here, and I don't know how simple it is, or if it's something that you might have gotten asked before, but do you have any advice for aspiring pilots or young people who dream of flying?
Absolutely. My advice would be use as many of the free resources as you can. There are so many people out there who are taking flights every day. There are extra seats on the airplane. I would be hard-pressed to find somebody who would say no to a really excited person who was out at the airport and said, "Can I check out your airplane? You know, can I go for a flight with you? Can you show me what it's like?" Ask for help. Ask for people to show you what their hangar space is like, why they got involved in aviation, what the education was like. You know, do you have a stack of old flight books that I could maybe borrow and learn a little bit about? There are so many free resources online too that are great ways to learn about flight. It does seem like an expensive hobby when you're looking at it in the outset of, oh my gosh, it's going to cost me $6,000 to $7,000 to get my private pilot's license. But when you think about getting into any sport, when you look at the cost of the equipment and the time spent, the time away from work, the cost of traveling to certain locations, it really is comparable to a lot of other hobbies out there. So people always say, oh, flying is so expensive, but there are ways that you can take out educational loans to do that. There are foundations all across the country that are looking to help people learn how to fly. That's why I started the Fly with Amelia Foundation, because I want to take away some of that fear about the fundraising that goes along with flight. So ask as many questions as you can. Hang out at the airport. Be one of those geeks that spends time there and hangs out in the airport restaurant, hangs out at the FBO. Maybe even for the younger folks out there, just getting a job at the airport. There are so many opportunities to go out and work with airplanes. Even at the entry-level positions, we're talking going out and working with the fuel trucks. Destiny, for instance, she's our very first scholarship winner. She washed airplanes to pay for her first few flight lessons. So hard work does pay off. And in terms of the education, as we lead into thinking about aerospace careers, focusing on math and science is so important. So early on, if you still have the opportunity to be in the educational side of it, math and science, there are great flight schools out there. Metro State, for instance, has a great aviation program here locally in Denver. They're all across the country. So the resources are there. And the reason that I know that and the reason that I can say that confidently is because I went from a year ago not having a foundation, no way to raise money legally. I got online, I Googled how to start a foundation. All the steps are there, and it's such a good metaphor for anything that you're trying to do. The answers are so easily found online that in order to learn to fly, just reach out a little bit, and there are so many people and organizations that'll meet you there halfway.
Fantastic. And those are all the questions that we have and that we received for the time allotted today. But Amelia, I just wanted to say thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today live, and we're looking forward to doing more of this in the near future.
All right, well, thank you so much. Thank you to everybody from my social networks and from Honeywell Aerospace's social networks. It was so fun to organize this. If you liked it, let us know. Let us know what we can do better next time and how we can do it differently. And boy, it's a learning process just like planning the flight around the world. So thank you for all of your questions. If you have any more, just shoot me a message on social media, and I will get back to you as soon as possible.
Perfect. And everyone, for more information about Amelia's flight around the world, you can, again, go to her website. And Amelia, tell us what your web address is again.
It's flywithamelia.org, and that has information not only about the aircraft, the Pilatus PC-12, we've got information about Honeywell Aerospace's programs and the avionics that are on the plane. We've also got all sorts of information about the foundation, which is a great way to get involved. And if you've got a young lady between the ages of 16 or 18 that's interested in flight, have her send me a message and we can start talking.
Perfect. You are definitely an inspiration, Amelia. And for more information about her as well, on our website, you can go to aerospace.honeywell.com or just search Honeywell Aerospace on our social networks, which are Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Google+. Thanks so much, and thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Bye.